Have you ever poured your soul into something, a project that became a part of you, only to have someone try and rip it away with the most breathtakingly arrogant lie imaginable? I have. An HOA Karen called 911 on me for opening my own garage, screaming at the top of her lungs that I'd stolen the classic car she had, in her delusional mind, just bought for me. It was a lie so audacious, so completely untethered from reality, that it left me speechless for a moment. But only for a moment. My name is Alex, and for 30 years, my world was VIN plates, engine block castings, and the subtle tells of a masterfully forged document. I was a forensic automotive engineer, the guy insurance companies and federal agencies called when they needed to prove a ghost car was real or a real car was a ghost. My job was to untangle the most complex vehicle fraud cases, to follow the breadcrumbs of grinder marks on a firewall or a misplaced digit in a title history. It was a career that demanded patience, precision, and a deep-seated intolerance for liars. When I retired, I wanted nothing more than to trade the courtroom for my workshop, to apply that same precision not to crime, but to creation. My magnum opus, the culmination of a decade of weekends and late nights, was parked right in that workshop. A 1969 Ford Mustang Boss 429, car craft number 1788, gleaming in a fresh coat of Wimbledon white. Every nut, bolt, and wire was period correct. I'd rebuilt the semi-Hemi engine with my own hands. It wasn't just a car. It was my legacy, a testament to a life spent in pursuit of mechanical perfection. That peaceful existence was shattered by Carol. She was the newly elected HOA president, a woman who moved into the neighborhood 6 months ago and immediately set about trying to mold it in her own image. She carried herself with the unshakable confidence of someone who has never been told no, her face permanently set in a mask of polite condescension. She glided through the streets on her power walks, her gaze scanning for infractions. A garbage can left out an hour too long, a lawn mowed in the wrong direction. She was a petty tyrant in Lululemon, and she had just found her new target. It was a perfect Saturday morning, the kind that was made for driving a classic car. I had a local show to get to, and the final step was a gentle polish of the chrome. I hit the button on the wall, and the garage door rumbled upwards, revealing the Mustang to the bright morning sun. It sat there like a museum piece, a pristine icon of American muscle. I was just admiring the light catching the fender when her voice, sharp and accusatory, sliced through the quiet. "What do you think you're doing?" I turned to see Carol standing at the end of my driveway, hands on her hips, her expression one of utter outrage. What Carol didn't know, what she couldn't possibly comprehend in her little kingdom of manicured lawns and beige siding, was that her absurd accusation wasn't just an attack on my property. It was an attack on my life's work, my integrity, and the very principles of logic and evidence that I had built my career upon. And she was about to receive a masterclass in forensic takedowns, one meticulously documented step at a time. Have you ever dealt with someone so entitled they attempt to rewrite reality in their own head, just because it suits them? Let me know in the comments below, because I have a feeling we have some stories to share. This isn't just a story about a crazy HOA dispute. It's about how a single, arrogant lie, when told to the wrong person, can become the thread you pull to unravel a person's entire carefully constructed facade, piece by meticulous piece, until nothing is left but the ugly truth. You're going to want to stick around for this. I blinked, taking a moment to process the sheer absurdity of her question. I was standing in my own garage, next to my own car. "I am sorry," I replied, my voice calm, giving her a chance to walk back from whatever bizarre ledge she was on. "I'm polishing my car." She marched up the driveway, her sneakers making determined, squeaking sounds on the concrete. She didn't stop until she was just a few feet away, close enough for me to see the righteous fury in her eyes. "Don't play dumb with me," she snapped, pointing a trembling, perfectly manicured finger at the Mustang. "That is my car. I just closed the deal on it yesterday. What are you doing in my new house, and why are you trying to steal my vehicle?" I felt a slow-motion sense of disbelief, the kind you get right before a car accident. Her words were so disconnected from reality that my brain struggled to find a framework for them. Carol, I said slowly, as if speaking to a confused child, this is my house. I've lived here for 20 years. And this is my car. I've owned it for 15-inch. She let out a short, derisive laugh. Oh, I see what's happening. You're the disgruntled tenant the agent warned me about. The one who was supposed to be out by Friday. She pulled out her phone, her thumbs flying across the screen with practiced ease. I have the bill of sale right here. Signed and sealed. Carol Jansen, owner. You need to leave my property immediately before I call the police. This was no longer a simple misunderstanding. This was a calculated, delusional performance. I took a step forward, my hands held up in a placating gesture, but my voice was firm. You need to get off my property now, Carol. You're trespassing, and you're making false accusations. That was the trigger. Her face contorted into a mask of theatrical victimhood. Oh, so now you're threatening me? A lone woman. She held her phone to her ear, her voice suddenly high and shaky. Yes, 911. I need help. There's a man at my new house. Yes, 124 Oak Street. He's trying to steal my car. He's being very aggressive. I'm afraid of what he might do. Within minutes, the serene quiet of our suburban street was shattered by the wail of sirens. 2 police cruisers pulled up, their red and blue lights painting streaks across my garage door and the faces of the neighbors who were now gathering on their lawns. Carol immediately burst into tears, a full-blown soap opera performance, pointing at me and babbling about how she just bought her dream house and dream car, only to find this criminal trying to take it all away. The 2 officers approached cautiously, one older and seasoned, the other younger, his eyes wide. The older officer, whose name tag read Miller, addressed me first. Sir, can you tell me what's going on here? I took a deep breath, consciously slowing my heart rate. Panicking was not an option. This was an information problem, and I dealt in information. Officer, I began, my voice even, my name is Alex. I own this house and I have for 2 decades. This woman, Carol Jansen, the HOA president, walked on my property and accused me of stealing my own car. Carol shrieked. He's a liar. Check the paperwork. I bought it. Officer Miller turned to her. Ma'am, can I see this bill of sale you mentioned? She fumbled with her phone, her confidence suddenly faltering. Well, it's a digital copy. My lawyer is finalizing the hard copies. She couldn't produce a thing. Miller turned back to me, his expression skeptical but professional. Sir, do you have any proof of ownership for the vehicle? This was my home turf. Yes, officer. I do. I walked calmly into my house, returning a moment later with a thick leather-bound portfolio. I opened it on the hood of the patrol car. Here is the vehicle's title and my name, issued 14 years ago. Here is the current registration. My driver's license with this address. My insurance card, also with this address and the car's VIN. And this, I said, flipping through page after page of glossy photos, is the restoration album. Over 1,000 pictures documenting every single step of me. In this garage, rebuilding this car from a rusted shell into what you see today, the younger officer whistled softly. Miller picked up the title, his eyes scanning the VIN, then walked over to the Mustang and checked it against the plate on the dashboard. He then looked at my driver's license. His posture relaxed. He had the truth. He turned to Carol, his voice now devoid of any sympathy. Ma'am, all the documentation here proves this man is the legal owner of this vehicle and this property. You've made a very serious false accusation. Carol's face crumpled, not with remorse, but with pure, undiluted rage. They're forgeries. He's a professional. Can't you see? He's tricked you. Miller's patience was gone. Ma'am, we're done here. This is at best a civil misunderstanding, and you are bordering on filing a false police report, which is a crime. I suggest you go home, humiliated in front of half the neighborhood. Carol shot me a look of pure venom before storming off down the street. The officers apologized for the disturbance and left. I thought that would be the end of it. It was just the beginning. The next afternoon, a crisp white envelope was taped to my front door. It was from the HOA. Inside were 2 violation notices. The first was for improper vehicle storage. citing the 20 minutes my garage door was open that morning. The second, and more ludicrous, was for operating an unlicensed commercial automotive business on residential property. The fines totaled $500. The letter was signed with a flourish by Carol Jansen, president. She hadn't just lied and weaponized the police. Now, she was weaponizing the HOA. This was no longer about a car. This was a declaration of war. The initial shock of a 911 call had been replaced by a slow-burning anger. This wasn't just a crazy neighbor. This was a person who, when confronted with irrefutable facts, chose not just to double down on her lie, but to escalate her attack through official channels. The violation notices were a clear abuse of her newfound power, a petty, vindictive jab meant to punish me for her own public humiliation. She had made a critical mistake. She thought she was dealing with a simple hobbyist, a retired man she could bully with bylaws and bureaucracy. She had no idea that my entire professional life had been dedicated to deconstructing complex systems and exposing the fraud hidden within them. The HOA, with its labyrinthine rules and power-hungry board, was just another system waiting to be analyzed. My old instincts, dormant since retirement, kicked back in with a familiar hum. I opened a new file on my computer, labeling it simply Project Nightingale, a nod to the Mustang's Wimbledon white paint. The first step in any investigation is to know the terrain. I spent the next 2 days poring over the HOA's covenants, conditions, and restrictions, or CC and RS. I read every line, every subclause, every amendment, highlighting ambiguous phrases and sections that granted discretionary power to the board. The rules she cited against me were, as I suspected, laughably vague. Improper vehicle storage was defined as leaving a garage door open for extended periods, with no specific time frame given. The prohibition on commercial business was meant to stop people from running a full-blown mechanic shop with customers coming and going, not a man polishing his own car. This was selective enforcement, the classic tool of a petty tyrant. My next step was to document the baseline. For the next week, I became the neighborhood's unofficial chronicler. I took time-stamped photographs from the public sidewalk. Mr. Henderson at 112 Oak Street, with his garage door open all day Saturday while he did his woodworking. The family at 205 Maple, with their son's project car on jack, stands in the driveway for 3 days straight. Mrs. Gable at 130 Oak, a real estate agent who had a steady stream of clients visiting her home office. By the end of the week, I had documented 17 clear violations of the very rules Carol was using against me, all committed by residents in good standing. This evidence alone would be enough to fight the fines, but I knew it wouldn't be enough to stop Carol. To do that, I needed to understand the investigator, not just the crime. I set up a small, discreet security camera on my porch, one that had a clear, legal view of the public street in front of my house. I wasn't looking for dirt. I was establishing a pattern of life. I logged her comings and goings, the times of her power walks, the frequency of deliveries. It was methodical, almost tedious work, but often the most crucial breakthroughs are buried in the mundane. While the camera gathered data, I moved to public records. A simple online search yielded her full name, previous addresses, and property records. I learned she'd moved from a wealthy suburb in a neighboring state just 6 months prior, selling her previous home in an unusually fast, all-cash transaction. There are no liens, no mortgages, just a clean, quick sale. Interesting. More intriguing, however, was a business filing linked to her name and new address. A limited liability company, an LLC, with the grand-sounding name of Prestige Lifestyle Consulting. The business description was vague, providing bespoke acquisition services for high-net-worth individuals. In my old line of work, names like that were a giant red flag. They were designed to sound impressive while meaning absolutely nothing, often serving as a legitimate-looking front for less-than-legitimate activities. My professional curiosity was now fully engaged. It was during one of my morning observations, while sipping coffee and reviewing the camera footage from the previous day, that I noticed something. It was a detail so minor that 99% of people would never see it, but to me, it stood out like a flare in the night. It was Carol's SUV, a late model, top-of-the-line Cadillac Escalade. As it passed my house, the sun glinted off the chrome trim around the windows. But the trim was wrong. It was the brushed aluminum finish from the lower-tier luxury trim package, not the bright, polished chrome of her top-tier platinum model. The 22-inch multi-spoke wheels were also from the previous model year. These weren't custom choices, they were inconsistencies. It was like seeing a Rolex with the wrong font on the date wheel. It was a tell. To anyone else, it was a fancy black SUV. To me, it was a puzzle. A vehicle that presented itself as one thing, but was in subtle ways something else entirely. Just like its owner. The foundation of her entire life might be just as mismatched and fraudulent as the trim on her car. The seed of a hypothesis began to sprout, a theory far darker and more complex than a simple HOA dispute. I was no longer just defending myself. I was on the hunt. A week after the first notice, a certified letter arrived. The crisp green and white of the USPS label felt like a deliberate escalation. Inside, the tone was no longer that of a simple violation notice. It was a formal, legal threat. The letter, drafted on official HOA letterhead, stated that my failure to pay the initial fines and my continued operation of an illicit enterprise had been reviewed by the board. The board, of course, consisted of Carol and two of her hand-picked cronies, Mildred and Stan, a pair of retirees who seemed to enjoy the reflected glow of Carol's authority. The letter demanded immediate payment of the original $500, plus a new fine of $1,000 for failure to comply. It concluded with the ultimate threat. If the full amount was not paid within 15 days, the HOA would exercise its right, as per Article 9, Section 4 of the CC and RS, to place a lien on my property. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. Reading the legalese, the hollow threats, I felt a cold, clear sense of purpose settle over me. Carol was a predator, and like any predator, she was relentless when she sensed weakness. But she hadn't sensed weakness. She had mistaken patience for it. The mismatched trim on her Escalade had bothered me more than this legal threat ever could. A lien could be fought in court with the mountain of evidence I was already compiling. But the secret of that SUV, that was a thread that could unravel everything. I put the HOA letter aside. It was a symptom. I needed to focus on the disease. I logged into a private database I still had access to through my old professional network, a powerful tool that aggregated data from DMVs, insurance companies, and salvage yards across the country. I ran a license plate from Carol's Escalade. The search churned for a moment before the results populated the screen. My eyes narrowed. The vehicle identification number, the VIN, associated with her license plate, was for a 2022 Cadillac Escalade Platinum, black on black. So far, so good. But then I saw the branding history. The VIN was branded. 2 years ago, in a state 300 miles away, this exact vehicle had been declared a total loss due to flood damage. It had been issued a salvage title and sold at auction to a scrap metal company for pennies on the dollar. A car with a salvage title, especially a flood car, is a pariah in the automotive world. Its electronics are unreliable, its frame can be compromised, and its resale value is decimated. It should not, under any circumstances, be registered with a clean title and driven as a daily vehicle. Yet, here was Carol driving a Ghost. My mind ignited, connecting the dots with the speed of a 30-year career. This was VIN cloning. It's a sophisticated form of fraud, elegant in its deception. A criminal organization steals a high-end vehicle. Then, they find a donor vehicle, a car of the same make, model, and year that has been legally totaled and sent to a junkyard. They acquire the VIN from that junked car. Using high-tech methods, they create a perfect replica of the donor car's VIN plate and federal certification labels. They affix these new tags to the stolen car, effectively giving it the legal identity of the junked one. They then use forged documents to register the stolen car under the clean title of the donor vehicle, washing away its stolen history. It's then sold to an unsuspecting buyer for a massive profit. It's a federal crime, a felony that carries serious prison time. And the pieces were fitting together with terrifying clarity. Carol's sudden move, the all-cash, quick sale of her previous home, likely to liquidate assets and cut ties. Her vaguely named shell company, Prestige Lifestyle Consulting. What better name for a business that illegally acquires and sells luxury goods? Her extreme, irrational aggression towards me and my Mustang wasn't just a personality quirk. It was the instinct of a professional fraudster who saw a high-value asset. My perfectly restored, fully documented, six-figure classic car, and her immediate, ingrained response was to try and take it through deception and fabricated ownership claims. She wasn't just an HOA Karen. She was a professional criminal, hiding in plain sight in a beige suburban cocoon. Her entire prestige lifestyle was a house of cards built on stolen metal and fraudulent paper. And her biggest mistake was trying to bully a man who had spent his entire life learning how to spot the cracks in the foundation. She thought this was about HOA fines. She had no idea I was about to charge her with felonies. The war had changed. The battlefield was no longer the neighborhood bylaws. It was the United States Criminal Code. The objective was no longer simply to defend my property from a lien. The objective was to dismantle a criminal enterprise and remove a predator from my community. A direct confrontation was out of the question. A criminal like Carol, when cornered, would lie, destroy evidence, and disappear. I couldn't just present my findings to the local police. The complexity of cloning cases often baffled patrol officers, and building a case could take months, giving her ample time to vanish. I needed to catch her in the act. I needed irrefutable, undeniable proof delivered in a way that would leave her no room to escape. My mind, trained in forensic sequencing, began to assemble a four-phase operational plan. It would be my own bespoke acquisition service designed to acquire justice. Phase 1 was the bait. I couldn't prove her past crimes without a full federal investigation, but I could catch her committing a new one. I needed a buyer, someone plausible and persuasive, looking for a very specific high-end vehicle. My thoughts immediately went to Mark Ramil. Mark was a high-end car broker I'd worked with on several cases over the years. He bought and sold rare and exotic cars for the ultra-wealthy, and he had the smooth-talking charisma of a born salesman. But underneath it, he had a street fighter's instinct and a deep love for legitimate automotive history. He loathed cloners and forgers. He would be the perfect Mr. Sterling, a newly minted tech millionaire with more money than sense. Through my network, I got a tip about a recent theft, a brand-new, top-spec Range Rover autobiography stolen from a dealer lot in a neighboring state. It was the perfect target vehicle, high value, in demand, and now in the wind. Phase 2 was the documentation. Every interaction between Carol and Mr. Sterling would be meticulously recorded. Our state had one-party consent laws for recording conversations, meaning as long as one party, Mark, knew he was being recorded, it was perfectly legal. We would collect emails, text messages, and audio recordings of every negotiation, every promise, every lie. This would be combined with my existing file on her HOA harassment, the false 911 call, the threatening letters, the photos of selective enforcement. Together, they would paint a portrait of a woman whose entire mode of operation was based on fraud and intimidation, whether she was trying to steal a house or sell a stolen car. Phase 3 was the trap. The stage for the final act would be, fittingly, the very place she felt most powerful, the HOA. She had already called a special meeting to be held in 1 week's time, with the express purpose of holding a public vote to approve the lien on my property. She intended it to be my public shaming. I would turn it into her public immolation. I would invite my cast of characters to this meeting. Mark, my buyer, Sarah Jenkins, a senior agent at the National Insurance Crime Bureau, and CB, whom I'd known for years, and if I could arrange it, the actual owner of the stolen Range Rover. They would be my jury. Phase 4 was the takedown. I would let Carol make her case against me in front of the entire neighborhood. I would let her preen and posture and lay out all her petty, fabricated grievances. Then, when she was at the peak of her self-righteousness, I would take the floor. I would present my case, not just defending myself against her ridiculous fines, but exposing her for the career criminal she was. The evidence would be presented publicly, stripping away her power and her credibility in one fell swoop. Right before the eyes of the community, she had tried to dominate. While I laid my plans, Carol continued her campaign of smug overconfidence. She must have seen me continuing to take photographs around the neighborhood, documenting bylaws violations. She clearly misinterpreted this as the desperate act of a man building a flimsy defense. An email arrived from her personal account, dripping with condescension. "Mr. Peterson, I see you're keeping busy. A friendly reminder that the special meeting is scheduled for Tuesday at 7 p.m. in the clubhouse. The board will be voting on the lien as per the agenda. I trust you'll be there to face the consequences of your actions. Regards, Carol Jansen, President." I smiled as I read it. The irony was a thing of beauty. Oh, I would be there, Carol. And consequences were indeed on the agenda. Just not for me. The trap was designed. Now it was time to bait it. The first call was to Mark. I caught him between an auction in Scottsdale and a client meeting in Miami. When I laid out the situation, the HOA president, the fake 911 call, the cloned Escalade, and my plan, there was a moment of silence on the line before he burst out laughing. "Alex, my friend, you retire from the game, and the game comes right to your front door. A little street theater to take down a high-end car thief? Count me in. This is better than Monterey Car Week. What do you need Mr. Sterling to be?" We spent an hour crafting the persona. A tech bro who just sold a startup, flashy but naive, the perfect mark for a predator like Carol. The second call was to Sarah at the NICB. She was a pro, all business, but her interest sharpened when I mentioned the totaled VIN on the Escalade and my suspicions about Carol's LLC. "A suburban HOA president running a cloning ring?" she said, a hint of excitement in her voice. "That's a new one. Send me everything you have, Alex. I'll start digging on my end. If your hunch is right, we can build a much bigger case here." I emailed her my initial findings, and with the weight of the NCB now officially involved, I felt the plan solidify. Sarah confirmed they had an open file on the stolen Range Rover autobiography and would be very interested in any leads. The bait was officially on the hook. Mark, as Mr. Sterling, made his approach through the contact form on the Prestige Lifestyle Consulting website. His message was a work of art, perfectly calibrated to appeal to Carol's greed and ego. "Heard from a colleague, you're the person to see for hard-to-find vehicles. I'm looking for a new Range Rover autobiography, long wheelbase, in British racing green with a tan interior. The dealers are all on backorder, and I'm not a man who likes to wait. Price is not a primary concern for the right vehicle. Let me know if you can assist." As I predicted, Carol responded in under an hour. Her email was smooth, professional, and exuded an aura of exclusive access. "Mr. Sterling, thank you for your inquiry. You've come to the right place. That particular configuration is indeed difficult to source through conventional channels. However, I do have a private client, a collector, who has a pristine example with delivery miles that he might be persuaded to part with. I believe we can have it for you within the week." The lies were already flowing. There was no private client. There was only a stolen SUV waiting in a warehouse somewhere to be laundered. Mark replied, playing the impatient millionaire. "Excellent. What's the asking price?" Carol's quote came back, $160,000. A brand new, top-spec autobiography retailed for closer to $200,000, assuming you could even get one. The discount was significant enough to be tempting, but not so large as to scream scam to an unsophisticated buyer. It was the perfect price point for a clone car. For the next few days, they engaged in a carefully choreographed dance via email and phone. I sat in my office, listening in on the recorded calls as Mark played his role to perfection. He was demanding, asking for specific photos of the interior stitching, questioning the tire specifications, and generally being the kind of high-maintenance client Carol would expect. She, in turn, was the consummate professional, assuring him of the vehicle's impeccable provenance and flawless history. "Of course, Mr. Sterling," she said in one call, her voice like honey. "The vehicle comes with a perfectly clean title and a full manufacturer's warranty. My firm only deals in the absolute best." The call was, of course, recorded. The next day, she emailed him a set of photos. It was the stolen Range Rover, parked in what looked like a sterile industrial garage. The color and interior matched perfectly. The license plates were temporary dealer tags, easily faked. This was my smoking gun. I forwarded the photos to Sarah at the NCB. She called me back within the hour. "It's the one, Alex. No doubt about it. We got a bolo out on it. And those photos are a direct link to your HOA president. We have enough to move, but your sting operation could give us everything on a silver platter. Let us know when a meet is happening. We'll be ready." The final step was to arrange the viewing. Mark told Carol he needed to see the vehicle in person before wiring such a large sum of money. They agreed to meet the next day, the day before the HOA meeting, in the parking garage of a high-end shopping mall in a neighboring town. It was a neutral, public location, perfect for a transaction of this nature. The trap was set. The bait had been taken. Carol had no idea that as she was preparing to sell a stolen car, she was also finalizing the script for her own destruction. She thought she was closing a lucrative deal. In reality, she was walking onto a stage I had built just for her. The day of the viewing was overcast and gray, a perfect backdrop for the quiet tension of the operation. Mark, dressed in the part of Mr. Sterling, wore a tailored sports coat, designer jeans, and an expensive watch. He also wore a state-of-the-art micro camera disguised as a button on his jacket and a high-fidelity microphone. I was parked 3 levels up in the garage of my unassuming daily driver, a late-model Ford Explorer, monitoring the audio and video feeds on a tablet. From my vantage point, I had a clear view of the designated meeting spot in a quiet, underused corner of the garage. At exactly 2 p.m., a large flatbed tow truck rumbled into the garage and carefully unloaded the gleaming British racing green Range Rover. It was a smart move on Carol's part. Driving the stolen car herself would be an unnecessary risk. A few minutes later, her black Escalade slid silently into a space nearby. She emerged, dressed in a sharp business suit, holding a leather portfolio. She looked every bit the powerful, legitimate broker. She greeted the tow truck driver, signed a piece of paper, and he promptly departed, leaving her alone with the stolen vehicle. Mark made his entrance, striding confidently towards her. "Carol?" "Mr. Sterling." "The car looks even better in person." The audio feed was crystal clear. "It's a magnificent machine, isn't it?" Carol replied, her voice smooth as silk. As I said, pristine for the next 20 minutes. I watched and listened as she gave him the grand tour. She pointed out features, ran her hand over the supple leather, and presented him with a stack of documents from her portfolio. I zoomed in with my own camera. I could see the title, a high-quality forgery, no doubt, and a set of falsified service records created to give the vehicle a plausible history. "Here is the title. Clean and clear, of course," she said, her voice dripping with confidence. "And the service history from the dealer. It had its pre-delivery inspection just last week." Mark played his part, asking seemingly innocent questions that were designed to get her to further incriminate herself. "So, your client, he just decided to sell it on a whim?" "He's an avid collector," she lied effortlessly. "Sometimes he buys a car, enjoys it for a few weeks, and then moves on to the next beautiful thing. It's a world of its own." Mark walked around the vehicle, running his hand along the fender. He leaned in close to the driver's side door jamb, where the federal certification label with the VIN was located. He was ostensibly checking the paint, but he was actually confirming the number on the forged label. "Everything looks great," he finally said. "I'll have my finance guy wire the money tomorrow morning after my personal mechanic gives it a quick final look over. I'll have a decision for you by tomorrow evening." It was the perfect way to end the encounter. It kept her on the hook, expecting a huge payday, and ensured she wouldn't spook and run before the HOA meeting. They shook hands, and Mark walked away. As soon as he was safely in his own car, he called me. "We got it, Alex." She handed me the forged title and everything. It's all on camera. That night, I didn't sleep much. I was fueled by adrenaline and a sense of impending justice. I sat at my computer, assembling my presentation for the meeting. It was the most important forensic report of my life. I structured it into 2 distinct parts. Part A was titled "A Pattern of Harassment." The weaponization of HOA bylaws. It was a calm, factual, and methodical dismantling of Carol's case against me. It included a timeline of events, starting with her bizarre 911 call. I had filed a public records request and obtained the audio of the call itself, as well as the body camera footage from Officer Miller politely explaining reality to her. It was damning. The presentation also included a map of the neighborhood with the 17 other documented bylaw violations, complete with timestamp photos. It was an undeniable portrait of a targeted, malicious campaign. Part B was where the hammer would fall. It was titled Prestige Lifestyle Consulting, a case study in interstate vehicle theft. This section laid out the entire criminal case in simple, easy-to-understand terms. It explained VIN cloning. It showed the salvage auction record for her own Escalade. It included the complete email chain between her and Mr. Sterling, and it featured curated audio clips from their phone calls, the most incriminating lines isolated for maximum impact. The finale would be the high-resolution photos of her, standing in the parking garage, holding the forged title to a stolen vehicle. I sent a carefully worded email to the entire HOA mailing list. The subject line was, "Important evidence regarding Agenda Item 7. Lien on 124 Oak Street." In the body, I wrote, "To all my neighbors, a motion has been made to place a lien on my home. At tomorrow's meeting, I will be presenting a comprehensive set of evidence that not only proves my innocence, but also raises serious questions about the integrity and fitness of our current HOA president to hold her position. The information I will share affects the safety and security of our entire community. I urge you all to attend." The fuse was lit. I confirmed attendance with my guests. Mark would be there. Sarah from the NCB would be there. And Mrs. Gable, the true owner of the Range Rover, was on a flight, her expenses covered by the NICB. She was determined to face the woman who had stolen her car. Carol, I was sure, would read my email and see it as a pathetic, desperate bluff. She would be expecting a sad little slideshow of my neighbor's messy flower beds. She had no idea she was the star of the show. The community clubhouse, normally a sleepy room used for potlucks and holiday parties, was buzzing with an energy it hadn't seen in years. My email had worked. The room was packed, with residents standing along the back wall. The air was thick with curiosity and neighborhood gossip. I saw faces I hadn't seen at a meeting in a decade, all drawn in by the promise of drama. At the front of the room, a long folding table was set up for the board. Carol sat in the center, flanked by her two loyal cronies, Mildred and Stan. She was wearing a power red blazer and a look of supreme confidence. She scanned the crowd, a queen surveying her subjects, and when her eyes met mine, she gave me a slow, condescending smirk. I gave her nothing back, just a calm, neutral expression. I spotted my team, scattered as planned. Mark, looking every bit the tech millionaire in a casual but expensive sweater, sat near the middle. Sarah from the NICB, in a nondescript pantsuit, looked like any other concerned homeowner near the back. And Mrs. Gable, a woman with kind but determined eyes, sat in the front row, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. They were invisible, just faces in the crowd, waiting for their cues. Carol banged a small gavel on the table, calling the meeting to order. She moved through the initial agenda items with brisk efficiency, her voice radiating authority. Then she arrived at item number 7. "Next on the agenda," she announced, her voice hardening, "is the board's motion to place a lien on the property at 124 Oak Street, owned by Mr. Alex Peterson, for failure to comply with community bylaws and refusal to pay outstanding fines." She then launched into a prepared speech, a work of self-aggrandizing fiction. She painted me as a rogue element, a menace to the neighborhood's peace and aesthetic harmony. She spoke of my unlicensed, noisy, and unsightly commercial auto body operation and my flagrant disregard for the rules that we all agree to live by. She portrayed herself as the reluctant enforcer, the tireless guardian of their property values, forced to take this drastic step for the good of the community. "The board moves to approve the lien," she concluded, looking at her cronies. "All in favor?" Mildred and Stan both raised their hands immediately. "The motion passes," Carol declared with a triumphant smile. "Is there any discussion before we adjourn?" I stood up from my seat. "Yes, Carol," I said, my voice carrying easily through the silent room. I have some discussion. I walked to the front of the room, carrying my laptop. I connected it to the projector that was already set up for the meeting. You've made some very serious and very public accusations against me, I said, turning to face the audience of my neighbors. So I've prepared a short presentation to ensure everyone here has the full context before this decision is finalized. Carol's smirk faltered slightly, replaced by a look of annoyance. Mr. Peterson, the vote has already passed. The vote was based on incomplete and misleading information, I countered smoothly. I'm sure the community would prefer to be fully informed. A murmur of agreement went through the crowd. Boxed in, Carol gestured dismissively at the screen. Fine. Be brief. The first slide appeared on the large screen behind her. It was the title, Part A, A Pattern of Harassment. I calmly walked my neighbors through the timeline, starting with the Saturday morning I opened my garage. Then, I played the audio. The room filled with the sound of Carol's voice, high-pitched and hysterical, lying to the 911 dispatcher. He's trying to steal my car. He's being very aggressive. Gasps rippled through the audience. Carol's face began to pale. I moved to the next slide, which showed the body cam footage of Officer Miller patiently explaining that all the documents proved the car was mine. I followed it with the photo gallery of the 17 other houses, all technically in violation of the same rules, none of whom had ever received a fine. The evidence was clear, simple, and undeniable. I wasn't a rule breaker. I was a target. Stan and Mildred were sinking low in their chairs, refusing to look at anyone. Carol's face was a mask of cold fury. This is irrelevant, she snapped. This is about his refusal to follow the rules. You're right, Carol, I said, my voice dropping slightly. This isn't just about unfair fines. I clicked to the next slide. The title appeared in large, bold letters. Part B, Prestige Lifestyle Consulting. It's about a pattern of fraud. I gave the room a brief, clear explanation of cloning. I could see the understanding dawning on people's faces. Then I put up the next slide, a side-by-side comparison. On the left, a photo of her pristine Escalade in her driveway. On the right, the official salvage auction record for the vehicle with the same VIN, listed as totaled, flood damage. The room erupted in murmurs. And it seems, I continued, my voice steady as a rock, that this business model extends to your current dealings. I then played the first audio clip. Carol's crisp, professional voice filled the room. The vehicle comes with a perfectly clean title and a full manufacturer's warranty. My firm only deals in the absolute best. Carol shot to her feet. This is illegal. You can't record me. This is an outrage. These are fakes. Actually, Carol, I said, turning to face her directly, in this state, only one party needs to consent to a recording. And the other party in that conversation, the man you know as Mr. Sterling, thought it was very important that we have a record of your promises. I paused, letting the weight of the moment hang in the air. In fact, he's right here with us tonight. Mark, would you mind standing up? In the middle of the room, Mark stood up and gave a polite, almost apologetic wave to the stunned crowd. Carol stared at him, her mouth opening and closing silently, comprehension and pure terror warring on her face. The trap had been sprung. The clubhouse, which had been simmering with murmurs, now boiled over. The sight of Mark, the real, living Mr. Sterling, standing in the room was a blow Carol couldn't deflect. Her carefully constructed reality had been punctured, and the lies were hemorrhaging out. She began to stammer, her voice losing its commanding tone, replaced by a shrill panic. This is a setup, a conspiracy. This man, she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me, is a criminal trying to frame me because he got caught breaking the rules. These recordings are doctored, deep fakes, but the evidence was too strong, the narrative too clear. Her neighbors weren't looking at me with suspicion. They were looking at her with a mixture of shock and disgust. Her authority, built on a foundation of intimidation and arrogance, was evaporating under the harsh glare of the projector screen. Her two bored cronies, Stan and Mildred, looked like they wanted the floor to swallow them whole. They were actively trying to slide their chairs away from her, physically distancing themselves from her toxic implosion. I held up a hand for quiet, and surprisingly, the room settled. I still had the floor. Carol, you claim to be the victim here, I said, my voice remaining calm and factual, letting my composure stand in stark contrast to her hysteria. But your business of selling stolen cars has real victims. People who have their property, their sense of security, stolen from them. I looked towards the front row. And the victim of the crime you were attempting to profit from yesterday is also here with us tonight. I gestured to the woman seated quietly near the front. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mrs. Gable. It was her family's Range Rover, the one Carol was selling to Mr. Sterling, that was stolen from their driveway last month. Mrs. Gable stood up, her small frame radiating a strength that commanded the room's attention. She didn't need a microphone. Her voice, though trembling slightly with emotion, was clear and strong. That car, it was a gift for my husband's retirement. We saved for years. When it was stolen, it felt like our home had been invaded. To know that this woman, she said, looking directly at Carol, was trying to sell our stolen memory for a profit. It's just sickening. The emotional weight of Mrs. Gable's testimony was a gut punch. This was no longer an abstract crime. It had a human face. The last vestiges of support for Carol in the room vanished. She was no longer just an overzealous HOA president. She was a ghoul profiting from the misery of others. Carol opened her mouth to object, to offer another frantic denial, but no words came out. She just stared at Mrs. Gable, her expression one of utter disbelief, as if she couldn't comprehend that her actions had actual consequences for real people. And that brings me to my final point, I said, advancing to the last slide of my presentation. It was a simple slide, containing only the text of U.S. Code Title 18, Section 2312, Interstate Transportation of Stolen Vehicles. Because arranging the sale of stolen property, especially across state lines, isn't just a violation of our community's trust. It's a federal crime. I turned my gaze from the screen to Carol, whose face had gone from red to a ghostly, blood-drained white. And when federal crimes are being committed, it's customary to involve federal law enforcement. That's why I took the liberty of inviting a representative from the National Insurance Crime Bureau to observe tonight's meeting and answer any questions you might have. In the back of the room, Sarah Jenkins stood up. She didn't say a word. She simply held up her badge, the gold shield catching the light from the overhead fluorescence. It was the final devastating blow. The fight drained out of Carol in an instant. The rage, the denial, the panic, it all vanished, replaced by the hollow, vacant look of absolute defeat. She saw the badge. She saw the disgusted faces of her neighbors. She saw the tear-streaked face of her victim. She saw her entire world, her prestige lifestyle, her carefully crafted lie, collapsing into ruin around her. She didn't scream. She didn't rage. She simply deflated, collapsing back in her chair like a marionette with its strings cut. At that moment, as if on cue, two uniformed police officers, who had been waiting discreetly in the lobby at Sarah's request, entered the room. They walked with quiet purpose directly to the head table. The clubhouse was so silent you could hear the hum of the projector's fan. They spoke to Carol in low, professional tones. They asked her to stand up. She did so mechanically, her movements slow and robotic. They cuffed her hands behind her back. The quiet click of the handcuffs echoed through the room. Without another word, they escorted a stunned, silent Carol Jansen out of the clubhouse. The sound of the door closing behind her was the loudest gavel in the world, bringing her reign, her lies, and her criminal career to an unceremonious end. The immediate aftermath was a scene of controlled chaos. As soon as the door closed behind Carol and the officers, the room erupted. Neighbors were on their feet, talking excitedly, processing the sheer whiplash of what they had just witnessed. They had come expecting a boring vote on a property lien and had instead witnessed the public dismantling of a criminal enterprise. Mildred and Stan, Carol's former cronies, were surrounded by angry homeowners demanding answers. They both looked terrified, stammering that they had no idea, that Carol had handled everything, that they were just as shocked as everyone else. Their pathetic attempts to distance themselves fell on deaf ears. Their tenure on the board was effectively over in that moment. Sarah from the NCB, along with Mark and Mrs. Gable, made their way to the front to shake my hand. "Alex," Sarah said with a grimly satisfied smile, "I've been to a lot of takedowns in my career, but I have never seen one done with a PowerPoint presentation in a community clubhouse. That was a masterpiece." Mrs. Gable hugged me, tears of relief streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "You got our car back. You gave us some justice." The next morning, the story was the lead item on the local news. Suburban HOA president arrested in sophisticated multi-state car theft ring. The report detailed Carol's arrest at the meeting, citing my investigation as the catalyst. My quiet neighborhood was suddenly filled with news vans. The HOA, in its disgraced state, was in shambles. An emergency meeting was called a few days later, where Stan and Mildred formally and tearfully resigned. The community, galvanized by the drama and the realization of how easily their trust had been abused, decided to wipe the slate clean. A special election was held, and a new board was voted in, comprised of reasonable, long-time residents who were more interested in maintaining the neighborhood than in wielding power. They unanimously voted to expunge my fines and issue a formal apology. They also asked if I would serve as a special advisor to help them rewrite the bylaws. I agreed. Over the next few months, we worked to strip out the vague, ambiguous language that Carol had weaponized, replacing it with clear, fair, and transparent rules and procedures. The community, having been brought together by a shared crisis, actually became a more cohesive and friendly place to live. As for Carol, her downfall was as swift as it was complete. Faced with the mountain of irrefutable evidence I had provided, the recordings, the photos, the documents, the witness testimony, her high-priced lawyer advised her to take whatever deal she could get. She pleaded guilty to multiple federal charges, including wire fraud and interstate transportation of stolen property. The judge was not lenient. She received a sentence of several years in federal prison. All of her assets, including her house and her cloned Escalade, were seized through asset forfeiture. The money was used to pay restitution to Mrs. Gable and at least 3 other victims that the NIC's expanded investigation had uncovered, all linked to prestige lifestyle consulting. The lien on my house was, of course, a distant, laughable memory. A few weeks after everything had settled down, I finally made it to that car show. The sun was shining, the chrome on the Mustang was gleaming, and there were no power-walking tyrants in sight. I spent the day talking to fellow enthusiasts, sharing stories, and just enjoying the peace I had fought so hard to reclaim. Late in the afternoon, they announced the awards. When they called my name for Best in Show, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. But the real victory wasn't the trophy. The real victory was the quiet knowledge that the skills I'd spent a lifetime honing hadn't retired when I did. The patience, the meticulous research, the unwavering belief in the power of evidence. These were not just tools for a job I'd left behind. They were the tools I had used to protect my home, defend my integrity, and bring a measure of justice to my own backyard. The moral of this story is simple. Arrogance is a fragile shield. People like Carol build their lives on the assumption that they are smarter, better, and more entitled than everyone else. They believe the rules are for other people. They consistently and fatally underestimate the quiet, methodical people they try to bully. They forget that a person's passion, whether it's for restoring a classic car, tending a garden, or simply living a peaceful life, can be a profoundly powerful motivator when it's threatened. They poke the bear, never realizing that the bear might just be a retired forensic engineer with a laptop and a lifetime of experience in taking down frauds. So never underestimate the person who just wants to be left alone to work in their garage. You never know what they're capable of building in there. Sometimes it's a show-winning Mustang, and sometimes it's an airtight federal case against the bully next door. What's the